This is Unit 1, Matter and Change, Lesson 1, Physical and Chemical Properties. The objective for this lesson is that you are able to differentiate, which means tell the difference between physical and chemical properties of matter. And then you can go ahead and read all the vocabulary terms. There's a lot of them for this lesson. So what you should do in your notes is write down the heading, the objective, and those vocabulary terms so you can be on the lookout for them during the lesson. So the big idea for this lesson is that the properties of matter differ from one type of matter to the next, and particular properties are useful for particular functions. So for example here, if you look at this house, why do we build houses out of particular materials? Why are your windows made of glass, but the house itself might be made of wood or laminate? Sneakers, I know we have a lot of sneaker fans. Why are the sneakers that you wear made out of particular materials? Why are the laces made of a different material than the rest of the shoe? And we can even talk about chemical properties, something like hydrogen peroxide. Why do you put that on your skin versus another substance? So that's what we're going to get into in this lesson, is just being able to describe the different properties of matter. So the first thing we're going to do here is write down this definition of physical property, a characteristic of matter that can be identified without changing its composition. Go ahead and write that down. But it's probably not helpful until we discuss what composition means. Composition is what a sample of matter is made up of. Think about the root of this word. Compose. So usually when you compose something, you can compose a piece of music. It means that you write it or make it up. So it's a little bit different in science, but obviously helps us to understand the root of the word there. Okay. All right, so I have lots of examples here for you, so let's go through them one by one. Some of them are going to require further definitions here. So the first one is color. You know that. Shape, familiar with that. Volume, very, 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 very important word for this class. It's how much space a sample of matter takes up. You buy drinks by volume. You don't buy them by their mass, right? And mass is the next term. It's actually how much matter is in a sample. Not how much space it takes up, but how much matter you actually have. Density is another one. It's how close particles are in a sample of matter. Boiling point is a temperature at which a liquid, oops, I did not mean to do that, at which a liquid turns into a gas. Melting point is when a solid turns into a liquid, that temperature. Conductivity, you can conduct two things, heat or electricity, either one. And then malleability, that's how you say that word. You should practice saying it. Malleability is the ability to be hammered into sheets without breaking, which sounds like a really funny property, but it's really, really useful. Think about aluminum foil. I mean, if we didn't know about malleability, then we wouldn't know what we could make, that sort of material out of. Any sort of metal is malleable. Your cars, you don't pull a car hood out of the ground. You hit it into a sheet, but so that it doesn't break. So connecting all of these examples back to the definitions, notice that I can describe any of these things: color, shape, volume, mass, density, boiling point, melting point, conductivity, malleability. I can describe that for a piece of matter, and I will not change its composition. I'm not going to change what it's made up of just by discussing its boiling point. All right, next, chemical property. A chemical property is the opposite of a physical property. It is a characteristic of matter that describes its ability to change its composition. Again, when I say composition, you have to think what it's made up of. All right, so let's take a look at some examples here. There's not as many as the other one. The first is its ability to react with another substance. I'm sure you were introduced to reactions in middle school. A couple reactions that you are familiar with are rusting. So when you put a metal outside and it gets wet, it starts to rust. And flammability, of course, is when you can set something on fire. Another chemical property, it doesn't always have to be that it does react. It could be its inability to react with another substance. So let's say a property of water is that it does not react with aluminum. Okay, so that's still a chemical property. It's just an inability to react. And then finally, the last one here is there are certain substances that have an inability to react with any other substance, and we call these inert substances. And you want to write that definition down of inert because it's one of our vocabulary terms. There's gases like helium that are considered inert. And you're probably familiar with helium. It's the gas that when you inhale it, it makes your voice really high from balloons. That doesn't really react with any other substances. It just doesn't. And later in the course, we will find out why. So I just want to make sure you understand that this is a key term. And anytime you discuss you discuss this term, reactivity, that's always going to be a chemical property. That is a key word there. So one thing I like to do after the notes is to give you a little check to make you feel better, hopefully, about the notes that you just took. And so you're going to answer this or do this task, which is label each of the following as a physical or chemical property. So you're going to pause me and go through each of these four and look back at your notes if you need to and try these out. So go ahead and pause me because I'm going to go over the answers. All right, spoiler alert, here we go. The candle is green. Green is a color, which would make this a physical property because I don't have to change its composition to describe it as green. The substance does not react with nitrogen. That is a chemical property because I'm discussing its reactivity. And just that would also lead you to believe that if you react something, it would change its composition. It's going to give you a new substance. The metal conducts heat well. Conducts is definitely a physical property. When you conduct heat, think about conducting heat, like putting a pot on the stove and it conducts heat, it gets hot. You're not changing the pot and what it's made out of. The last one, the substance froze. Now this was not exactly in your notes, but think about what freezing means. Doesn't freezing mean going from a liquid to a solid? And that sounds an awful lot like boiling point and melting point because you're changing the state of matter. So this I would also classify as a physical property. If I freeze water, it is still water, right? So give yourself a little pat on the back if you got all four of those right. If not, it's okay. I hope you learned why they were correct, and if you didn't, you're going to come in tomorrow with questions into class. All right, so that wraps up this lesson. Nice job.